But let me introduce myself first, get it out of the way, and then onto the panel. My name is Tatiana. I'm a director of FemTech Lab Accelerator, and I'll be moderating this panel today. So for those of you who are new to our community and for some reason haven't been to very successful sessions and webinars that we are running regularly, or maybe some of our in-person events, I'll introduce FemTech Lab and what we do. We are a global platform for innovators and disruptors in women's health space. Our goal is to innovate this amazing wave of products and support the founders and help them go to market, help them fundraise, help them find the right partnerships, whether it's B2B or attracting B2C customers. We run 2 cohorts a year, spring and autumn. And our founders are supported by a network of over 200 mentors right now, and this network is growing. We have leading industry experts, corporate partners, and over 400 investor partners now. We have also just recently launched an Angels Club to support early stage startup angel investment into women's health. So, coming back to the, probably I've been asked to mention a very exciting point of another initiative that we are doing as FemTech Lab. We are launching an incredible futuristic flagship conference. The conference will take place on the 12th of June. As part of the conference, the current cohort will also do the innovation showcase. So the demo day will be during the conference. But the conference itself is called the Decoding the Future of Women. Kate will share a link. Have a look, check it out. It's a really fantastic conference, and it's not just about the innovation, but really mind-bending ideas that's out there. It's never been done before. It's not going to be anything like any other conferences that we've had in women's health. So it's going to be something really amazing. Hopefully we'll see you there. It's June 12th. Again, check out our Eventbrite page and the page for the event itself. But without further ado, let's get, I can see attendees are already gathering, so we have a good group and we can kick off the actual webinar. And let me start by introducing our fantastic panel. So first of all, we're joined by, and correct me if I'm pronouncing it wrong, but it's Jes Baikins, crowdfunding consultant in Crowdfund 360 with 6 years experience in rewards product and equity crowdfunding campaign. Jes helps socially focused founders raise funding to bring their projects to life and hopefully take them to the next level. We're also joined by Stephanie Yeates, operations director at ISQ Crowdfunding. Stephanie supports companies in launching successful equity crowdfunding campaigns on some Europe's leading equity funding platforms. So we have a really good representation from the crowdfunding specialists. And we're also joined by a brilliant founders that are also alumni of FemTech Lab. Really excited to see you guys here. And first of all, allow me to introduce Ilaria. Ilaria is the founder of Joie. Hi, Ilaria. So amazing to see you here. It's been a while since you've graduated from FemTech Lab and doing fantastic things since then. They made 150 pre-sales during their crowdfunding campaign, achieving 135% of their objective. Joie is on a mission of creating inclusive devices to improve sexual wellness for queer people. Really excited to see you guys here. We are also supposed to be joined by Charlie, who is another founder. He's a founder of Sisters and one of our alumni companies, but I think he's being held up somewhere else. Okay, we can kick off. Thank you so much, Ilaria, Steph, Jes. Thank you for joining us. This session is, the discussion is going to be very hot. So I will start with the first question. Again, feel free to add your questions to the Q&A chat or to the chat on Zoom. But let's kick off the conversation with Jes. A question to you. What are the different types of crowdfunding available, and which ones, in your opinion, are the best suited for women's health startups?
Yeah, so there are three main types of crowdfunding. There's donation crowdfunding, rewards crowdfunding, and equity crowdfunding. If we're thinking about funding a business, probably donation crowdfunding isn't going to work great because no one wants to make you richer, get poorer themselves, and not get anything in return. But if there was a strong charitable element of your project, then you might want to think about doing a donation crowdfunding campaign. So that really leads us with rewards crowdfunding and equity crowdfunding. Rewards crowdfunding, it's all about those pre-sales. It's kind of getting those customers before the product is made. And that's really then, again, focusing on a product. So apps and things don't tend to do very well on rewards crowdfunding, but products aimed, in this case at women's health, will do better on rewards crowdfunding. Equity crowdfunding works better on apps, on web-based solutions where there isn't something physical, but also we can look at different stages of the business. Equity crowdfunding works better when we want to grow the business rather than just starting out to test the market, test the product, because with equity crowdfunding, like I'm sure Steph is going to say, it's a lot of a stronger focus on the finances. Those investors want to see traction. They really want to see you've already got a market out there that is buying your product, going to buy your product, and obviously make those investors a larger sum of money at the end. Whereas the rewards-based crowdfunding is really before that to test the market. Is this the product that the customer wants? And obviously, am I going to start? What works really well is that in general, the strategies needed for rewards and equity crowdfunding are quite similar. So a lot of companies might do a small rewards crowdfunding first to kind of test the waters, see whether they even like crowdfunding, because some people really don't like it, see what their team is good at, what their team needs to improve on, so that when they go to an equity crowdfunding campaign, they've already had a practice run, and actually they're going to have a much higher chance at succeeding, because equity crowdfunding is going to raise them a lot more money. And it's really, playing with much larger amounts of money and investors giving away larger amounts of money.
That is really insightful, Jes. Thank you so much. And I like how you can kind of structure your crowdfunding strategy to hit the right target. Steph, would you like to add anything from the equity crowdfunding perspective? And also, how can I, as a founder, ensure that my health tech startup is compliant with crowdfunding regulations? Because it's quite a lengthy process to set up a crowdfunding campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. First, I just want to reiterate what Jes said really about the differences between equity and rewards crowdfunding. We tend to find that the rewards crowdfunding works best for earlier stage businesses when you're just, as Jes said, trying to test a product to market, really, idea stage, that kind of thing. Equity crowdfunding is better for later stage startups or scale up businesses when you've not necessarily got your product to market yet, but you're about to, and you've got much more traction and achievements to talk about. And like Jes said, it's equity. You're looking for investors. These aren't backers or potential customers that are looking for like a reward, like a freebie in exchange for a small donation. These are hopefully some big ticket equity investors, ranging from 10, 20K plus. Nobody's going to invest 20 grand in your business just for a few freebies in 6 months' time. So you need to be a going concern, a point or a stage in your business where you're looking for high growth, so that potential investors can really see this as an interesting investment opportunity with a clear route to exit at the end. And the other thing to reiterate is I agree with you. You need to have a really clear sort of focus of where you want to take the business, but also it takes time to prepare your crowdfunding campaign. This isn't something that you can just chuck up in a couple of weeks. It takes much longer to prepare an equity crowdfunding campaign than it does for rewards. I'm not an expert in rewards, but I'm sure Jes would agree. It can be produced very, very, very quickly. You can kind of chuck up a campaign overnight. Equity can take months to really present the opportunity well, to get that backing, that validation from the community, from your network, in order to launch a successful and strongly validated campaign.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you very much, Steph. So it's almost equity crowdfunding is pretty much as you would prepare, you need to prepare for crowdfunding as you would prepare for your investment round with angels or VCs. So it's the same amount of work and kind of strategic thinking is required. So why, maybe if you can, Jes and Steph, I know that's not your focus, but maybe you can jump in, or Charlie and Ilaria, when would you think equity crowdfunding, and when would you think actually angel and VC fundraising?
Sorry, who's going to take that one?
Steph, do you, if you have a comment on that, or otherwise I'll move to Charlie.
I mean, in terms of equity crowdfunding versus VC or angel rounds, typically we see it as all part of the same round. So we see a lot of angels and VCs coming on board as part of the pre-commitment, the lead investment that is needed in order to validate that campaign. So it doesn't necessarily have to come on board sort of invested into the live part of the campaign under the platform's nominee. It can be separate, it can be onboarded as a direct investment in advance, but it's all part of the same round. So a lot of people think that they have to do either an angel VC round or an equity crowdfunding campaign. That's not necessarily the case. You can do both and have it all under the same hat.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you very much, Steph. Right. So Charlie, hi. Thank you so much for joining. I'm glad you've connected finally. So I've already introduced you briefly, but Charlie is the CEO at Ancestors, who raised equity crowdfunding 3 times, I believe, via crowdfunding platforms, and all campaigns have been oversubscribed. And Ancestors is on a mission to bridge the gender health gap and improve the menstrual health of millions of people worldwide with a user-centric menstrual health ecosystem. Again, we're extremely proud to have companies like Ancestors and Joie as part of our FemTech Lab founders community. So my next question to our founders, Charlie, Ilaria, you've done fantastic crowdfunding campaigns for your startups. What kind of the key learnings from your experience, what are the key things that you need to create an effective crowdfunding campaign? And also, at what stage, and that okay, let's do this first one, and I'll jump to the next part of the question. Charlie, do you want to kick off?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, thanks for having me. You can hear me, right?
Perfect.
Yeah, no more technical challenges. Look, Tatiana explained very well. We've raised money 3 times through crowdfunding. We've used both Crowdcube and Seedrs, twice Crowdcube, once Seedrs. I suppose in some respects that shows which platform at least we as a business have a preference for. I suppose just jumping back on the previous question in terms of angel versus crowdfunding, they are part of the same round. If you choose to go for crowdfunding, in at least this day and age, it's very rare to have a crowdfunding campaign that is purely crowdfunded, unless you're going through sort of a Kickstarter type model, which is entirely different. You typically have to have accrued already lead investment, in inverted commas, of between 80 and 90% of your target. Most businesses open up their platform to the public, or sorry, their equity crowdfunding round to the public after already having 100% of their target. And again, target in this scenario is not always the amount of money that you actually want to raise as part of your round. So crowdfunding is extremely psychological, and you want to create good momentum for your campaign. Our learnings, obviously there's so many learnings when you go through a crowdfunding campaign. My first one is if you have a strong community, i.e. a large number of customers, or at least a large number of people that buy in to your business, then a equity crowdfunding campaign is a great way to increase the overall size of your round. And it doesn't really require any more uplift than you would otherwise have to I suppose put the work in for an overall round with angels or venture capital. The only additional uplift, I suppose, is answering questions for investors that are going to be put very small amounts of money into your business. But overall, those questions tend to be very similar to what people are putting either larger amounts or even venture capital is asking you. For me, probably the biggest learning actually is the way that a crowdfunding campaign works. And obviously we've done it a number of times to know the sort of seasonality of a campaign. You tend to get a lot of investment in your first few days. Then you tend to have a very, very, or what's called the silent period or dead period for about 2 weeks. And then for the last week or so of your campaign, again, tends to liven up, and about 80% of your investment will come in those first few days and then the last week. And I suppose the second learning, which I've already said, which we sort of became aware in our first round and actually mainly in our second round, is the level of essentially lead investment that you do require for your campaign to be successful. You're going to have to put a lot of the hard yards in for your overall investment round, before you even start engaging with the crowdfunding platform. I suppose I'll stop there because otherwise I could monologue for a long period of time.
Thanks so much, Charlie. So much I want to kind of unpack there. But Ilaria, what was because you've done a product crowdfunding, is that right?
Yeah, so I would say that the general learnings are more or less the same. I think that what's slightly different is the moment where you do your campaign, because indeed you do it before you actually have a product. And so for us was key to actually build a community around the project before, because those people are people that do not know you personally, have never tested your product, just believe you on the base of what you're trying to build as a project. And so I think that one main learning, I would say really, it's super important to build a community, and a big one and an engaged one, but you have to be also conscious about the fact that it's easy for people to follow you on Instagram or whatever account, but then it's a different thing going from followers to backers of a project. So actually put your money where your mouth is. So you really have to be, not because you have 10,000 followers, it means that you will have thousands of pre-sales. So you really have to be considerate about that. Then I would say that in terms of the lead investment that you need to have, it's slightly lower for products for a reward-based crowdfunding. So this suggests you to have more or less like 30% of your campaign covered by really your inner circle. And your inner circle, it's really you, your friends, your family, like people you would invite to your wedding, and just ask them, can you please buy my my product? And just make sure that that covers at least for the 30% of your campaign. For the same reason that Charlie was mentioning, the momentum and the kind of empty bar effect that you want to avoid. So you want to, the moment you communicate with your community to support you, they have to see that there are already people backing you up, because if they come and they see that it's empty, it's kind of scary for people that don't know you. So really focus on community building, I would say, is the first really condition to be able to even launch. And then I stop here. If you have more questions, I will add up, because we have many learnings.
Thank you so much, Charlie, Ilaria. So Charlie, just a follow-up question. You've done 3 campaigns. So obviously you found the crowdfunding a useful exercise for you. How early, so the first campaign that you started, how early in your startup growth were you? And were there any differences to the last one that you've done? Because obviously you've grown quite a bit as a startup.
Yeah, so our first round, we'd been operating for about a year, maybe a little bit less. We were post revenue and we had product in the market, etc. So we obviously had some traction stats that we could put out. But to be honest, at that stage, again, your investors are typically investing in the vision and the mission of the business rather than the traction stats that you do have, and obviously in the people as well, mostly the other people than me. But when we first raised, which was back in 2019, crowdfunding was a bit of a different landscape. You could start a campaign to the public on one of the crowdfunding platforms with about 20 to 30% of your target. And we did do that. We went live, I think, about 25%. And obviously we funded and overfunded. In today's crowdfunding world, that certainly would not be possible. Well, I say not be possible. Obviously, I'm sure there are scenarios of where that does occur, but it's rare. The majority of companies, including ourselves, are going live to the public where you're either already oversubscribed or you're almost there. And you definitely tend to find that the momentum in your campaign picks up, once you are over the 100% barrier. Or hurdle, and there are some good reasons for that. Again, I think there's a lot of psychology that goes into building momentum for a crowdfunding campaign, even simple things like on the platforms themselves. And again, I'm only talking about the two big ones. They have things like the bar color is amber until you're 100% and green when you're over 100%. And for retail investors that investing obviously with their head but also their heart, obviously having like a green bar showing momentum of you over 100% when all the campaigns are there, and there's one or two campaigns on the amber bar below, doesn't exactly attract the eye to your campaign, and is, as I said, about really getting people to look at your campaign over the other 30 that are present on the platform at that point in time. That's probably been the biggest difference. Other ones are, obviously as we've become more established as a business, brand awareness is much higher now than it was at the beginning, is the level of questioning. In our first campaign, we maybe had 10 questions in total over the campaign. In our last one, we had, well over 100, which is, I always think, a really, really good exercise. At the end of the day, you're crowdfunding and everyone has the opportunity to ask a question, and that's almost the best part of crowdfunding. I suppose on the negative side, which obviously is really important to say because there's lots of pros to crowdfunding, there's also some negatives. Obviously, the negatives are it's reasonably expensive to crowdfund. The fees are definitely negotiable. If anyone has any questions, I'm very happy to answer those. But also in terms of corporate governance, so both platforms have pretty restrictive clauses they want you to put in either shareholders agreements or in your articles, and they can become problematic at a later date when you're raising money either from venture capital or from angels or family offices, etc. If you plan to raise multiple rounds, and in some respects can be overarching versus the amount of money that you're actually raising through the platform. So it's definitely something to consider if you're always future-proofing your business, I suppose. So it is something that you definitely need to consider when you are raising.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Charlie. We have some fantastic questions coming up in the Q&A chat. Feel free to add them on. We'll jump to them shortly. And probably one final question before we jump into the Q&A. And it's open to everybody. Feel free to jump in. How do you determine a reasonable crowdfunding goal, and what kind of factors should startup consider when setting those goals for crowdfunding?
I'll go for rewards crowdfunding because, most people will do that before they go onto an equity if they're going to have a product or something. I always ask my clients, how much do you want? How much do you actually need? Because those two are quite often very different amounts. And then where is a comfortable middle line that, again, like Ilaria said, that we can actually hit with our inner circle? And then we can work out how much we are going to raise and also when we're likely to launch. Because again, if our inner circle really isn't hitting that amount, and with my clients, I always say like 40 or 60% we need secured before we go live. So if we can't secure that amount of money before we go live, then either we've got two options. We delay going live, we delay the launch of our campaign until our brand awareness, our community is built up enough that we can hit that inner circle amount, or we lower that inner circle amount. And then it's up to the entrepreneur and the startup to really decide, which is more important in this area, and actually how much money do they realistically need? Because again, most people come to me, they want to crowdfund, they say they need this much. We look into all of the financials and we can really bring it much lower. And with the psychology of it, you want to have the lowest target possible so that you can go into your overfunding. If your target's £20,000, but you've made £60,000, that looks great. If your target's £100,000, but you've only made £60,000, that doesn't look so good. And actually that's going to put people off. So it's looking at the financials, the launch dates, and then the psychology and making all of those things work together. That's what I'd say you'd look at for working out how much you want to raise for rewards.
Thanks very much, Jes. I hear psychology as a kind of common thread, as a red thread going through that. So it's a lot of kind of thinking psychologically and kind of people mindsets. This is super interesting. Steph, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, totally agree with what Jes said. And that's very similar to what Charlie mentioned earlier about what we call campaign positioning. So where you're setting your targets and what that looks like on launch, it's much better to go out with a target that you know is achievable, and whether that's something it doesn't necessarily need to be overfunding already. You don't have to have hit 100%, but you need to be very close to it, so that investors looking in, especially on equity campaigns, can have real confidence that your campaign is going to achieve that target and considerably overfund. If they look at your campaign and it's only got sort of, 40, 50% on the bar, and no realistic expectation of being able to close that gap, they're unlikely to invest. Even if they like the proposition, they like the opportunity, and we've had that ourselves with clients in the past, whereby an investor will give them feedback and say, I really love this is great, but I just don't think you're going to hit your target, therefore I'm not going to invest. So there's a real game to be played. And, this comes back around to the psychology and then sort of campaign launch strategy about where you set that goal, that target, to make sure that it is achievable, so that the perception of the campaign is that it's successful. And like Jes said, we often talk about having 3 different targets as well. So you're especially with equity, your absolute minimum that you'd be happy to walk away with a smile on your face and still do something towards business growth and traction. Then there's obviously your maximum equity cap, which is the most you're happy to be giving away in terms of equity. And then somewhere in the middle is what you really want, but you would be happy to walk away with a big smile on your face, not quite the maximum, but you would still consider that as a successful campaign. And there's a bit of work to be done in advance of the campaign launching in terms of trying to figure out where that target is by digging into their network and doing a real, what we call here at ISQ, a crowd scoping exercise. So having a look at the groups and the individuals in their network, trying to figure out who their key priority contacts are, who to contact in what order, who could be the potential lead investors for this campaign, and who are then the medium-sized investors and the smaller-sized investors, and then pulling together a really well-defined marketing and comm strategy in order to achieve that goal and that target that they're setting out.
Maybe I can add something about the reward crowdfunding. I think that you have to also consider the cost of actually producing the goods that you're supposed to sell, and not overlook the marketing expenses that you might need to do, because you need to prepare visuals, video materials. Also, you might need to do some acquisition prior the campaign to get email addresses, so to really make sure that you do have that community that will support you. And so it's really important to consider that in the financials of setting the right amount, because at some point you might happen that you basically, maybe you can reach the target, but it's not even ROI positive because we have spent more money or like slightly less, and so it's not really, you don't really have that resources that will allow you to actually move forward.
Fantastic, thank you so much. So we're moving on to the Q&A chat. We have some fantastic questions, and probably the first one I'll address to you, Ilaria. Caroline is curious to know of any advice on crowdfunding for sexual wellness space. Of course, there are some restrictions in the industry. What was your experience with that?
So I guess it really depends on the platform that you choose. We did it on Ulule. It's a French platform because we are based in France, but they actually operate in all Europe, and they have a focus on impact project. And so the way we actually sold the project was very axed on the impact, on the social impact, on wellness. So we didn't really add that restriction in terms of like on the platform, we didn't have any restriction. Then it's more the restriction of actually doing what I was saying, acquisition. That was impossible for us to do because like that time was really impossible on on our Instagram or Facebook to actually do ads. So that was more the issue that we faced, but the platform wise wasn't particularly difficult.
Thank you. And there's a follow-up question building kind of on the same things, and everybody feel free to jump in. So basically FemTech startups characterized by a lot of taboos and stigma, and I'm sure both Ilaria and Charlie have experienced it with advertising, etc. How does it influence crowdfunding campaign? And I think Ilaria, you already mentioned that it didn't. I wonder, Charlie, if it did, if you had experienced anything like that. And could crowdfunding be a more democratic way of supporting startups and kind of opening the barriers to and opening the wider audience to this topic?
I think it's kind of, I suppose it's kind of obvious from the name in crowdfunding is it does democratize the ability to invest in early stage businesses for, you know, people who otherwise wouldn't have either the financial means or the know-how of how to. Crowdfunding is great for anything, either within sort of taboo space, but also, you know, female-founded businesses. Obviously, everyone knows the statistics, or you know, the shocking statistics in terms of how much money goes towards female founders or female co-founders. And the reality is that the landscape is moving at a snail's pace when it comes to venture capital, and even to a certain extent, angel investment as well. And so sometimes crowdfunding is one of the only options available. And as I said, you know, it tends to start from grassroots, and these are investors who can, you know, put in £100, £200, £500, you know, £10,000 in some examples. And so you're opening up your ability for your business to essentially a whole source of investment that essentially is, well, it's not available through venture capital, and certainly hard to find through angel networks. So I think crowdfunding is a great way for businesses that would otherwise struggle to attract capital because of either the nature of their business or their setup.
Yeah, I'd add to that, the crowdfunding for these types of like niches that aren't easily funded by the typical investor, crowdfunding is perfect for. And in the crowdfunding world, even back when I started in 2017, like female health crowdfunding campaigns were really big across America. They were really big. It's nothing new. And women do better at crowdfunding than men in general. They look at it more holistically. They don't just necessarily want the money, they want the other added benefits. So it is a real space that I think niche industries can really take a hold over.
Fantastic. It's good to have that platform to support niche startups. Building on this conversation, I'll jump to the question about, so somebody's asking about platforms leading and organizing crowdfunding. Are there any specific to FemTech industry? any crowdfunding platforms? And which ones have you used? Which ones have you found most easiest to use?
I don't know any that I would say are specific to FemTech industry. If I'm thinking about rewards crowdfunding, the one thing I'm thinking about first is this a global product, or am I only happy to like have it sold and everything marketed in the country I'm in, which in this case would be the UK. Globally, your two biggest, Indiegogo and Kickstarter. Indiegogo, it's pink. Kickstarter, it's black and green. But jokes aside, Indiegogo does have a larger female audience than Kickstarter. Kickstarter has a much stronger male audience. So if I was looking to sell, let's say I've created a product that's aimed at female health, I want to sell it globally, I'd be going to Indiegogo. There have been a lot of FemTech campaigns there in the past. Female focused products have been really popular there. And you know that they've already got a big selection of the audience that you're going for. If you went to Kickstarter, you just make your life harder because your audience wasn't already there. And then if you're looking for the country-based, like Ilaria said, she was in France, so she used that French-based platform, although it has a European scope. If you were in the UK and you only wanted to post your product out to people in the UK, then I would say I would use Crowdfunder as a platform. It's the biggest one in the UK for rewards crowdfunding. And I would also check, because there are certain times of the year where there is extra pockets of money, such as match funding, which are for, they often have like a female founders pockets of money or female focused businesses pockets of money that I would then think to tap into as well.
Thanks very much, Jes. Charlie, you've had a certain preference for one platform over the other. Why? And can you elaborate a bit more? And also, there is an interest that the platform takes. Is there like a commission? Is there a different? Are they the same across all platforms? Is that a factor that you consider when choosing a platform as well?
On this one, I can only speak from personal experience. Of course, I'm sure there's lots of people you can talk to who have a different view to me. Said we've used both Seedrs and Crowdcube, and also with the platforms, they change a lot, right? Over time, there was the acquisition of Seedrs by Republic, and whether that's had any impact on Seedrs, still to be determined. The reality is there's a lot of cross-pollination in terms of the investor base between Crowdcube and Seedrs, i.e. investors on Crowdcube typically are also on Seedrs. What we sort of found was it's like the fingers and thumbs argument. Essentially, Crowdcube had a much wider investor base. They were also on Seedrs, but there were lots of investors who were only on Crowdcube, whereas investors on Seedrs tend to be on both platforms. And so you were opening yourselves up to a wider pool. Our ticket sizes on Crowdcube tend to be larger than they were on Seedrs. And overall, we tend to find that Crowdcube investors, were much more mission-driven than Seedrs investors. Seedrs investors tend to be purely around the numbers, which, don't get me wrong, those questions are great. But for us and for what we stand for as a business, having the sort of mission-driven investors and impact investors is incredibly important. And there were just more of them on Crowdcube than there were on Seedrs. In terms of rates, i.e. what you pay, they're certainly negotiable. They tend to be very expensive, what you get quoted first, and the more campaigns you do, the more weight you have in the argument, I suppose. But in terms of difference between the costs on either one, it's reasonably negligible, i.e. they will both agree to the same rates, and you can play them off against one another again. Sorry if anyone from Seedrs Crowdcube is here. In terms of, the only other thing to be aware of is for advertising, Seedrs will charge you for advertising, whereas Crowdcube tend not to. So that's obviously an added bonus of Crowdcube over Seedrs. Last point, again, I don't want to take up too much time, but the last point is in terms of how the platforms take investment. So Crowdcube essentially take pledges, which means that no money parts ways until the end of the campaign. Then there's a cooling off period, I can't remember, I think it's 14 days for Crowdcube, which basically is when an investor can say, actually, I don't want to invest the money, in which case what your campaign finalizes on won't necessarily be the amount of money you receive. and actually they can be markedly different, whereas seeders take the investment then and there, which on paper can sound better, but in my experience, the Crowdcube model tends to work better because firstly, it means that investors feel less friction when they are investing, making the decision to invest, I suppose, which is the pledge. And secondly, the investments tend to flow throughout the campaign because it doesn't really make a difference if you invest at the beginning or at the end or in the middle. Whereas with seeders, because you're parting with your money then and there, obviously people tend to wait until they see what's going to happen with the campaign. And so your investment tends to flow in at the last minute, which obviously for investors that, I don't know, have holiday plans or whatever, it might not your campaign ending might not necessarily correlate with their personal plans, so you might miss out on them. So there's no quantitative evidence for that, but certainly qualitative.
That's a fantastic insight into so many different platforms. Thank you so much. So coming back to the Q&A chat, we have a specific question, and I don't know if probably Jes or Steph, if you had any experience with pharmaceutical development crowdfunding campaigns, and if they are, especially for personalized medicine, if you found them successful.
I'm trying to rack my brain now for examples of what we've done. We've definitely done some pharma campaigns, and they've definitely been successful. They're certainly fewer and far between. And I think from a platform's perspective, they are getting a lot stricter in terms of the compliance that they need, the due diligence process that they will put a campaign through before it launches, which I don't think, just correct me, is quite as strict with the reward side of things because it's not a financial promotion. So everything for an equity campaign has to go through compliance and due diligence to sign it off as a financial promotion, and it's regulated by the FCA, of course. So with the pharma stuff, every claim that they're making, every from simple things like facts and figures around the market, or any kind of misleading or leading statements that they're making, you know, for example, like, we're the best this or we're the only that, they have to evidence that. So for these medical campaigns, it's even stricter because you have to have, let's say that they're talking about a benefit to your health, you need to have that proper evidenceable proof, whether it's from a doctor or the NHS or market research or something to prove that claim that you're making. So it can be a lot more strict and difficult to actually launch these campaigns.
I know that there was one platform a few years ago that was an Israeli platform that was focusing on like medical research, but I don't know whether it's still up and running. We've only done some medical research campaigns, but they were donation-based campaigns. So it was a charity that was looking to do research to see whether, I think it's psilocybin, can't pronounce it. It's an ingredient in magic mushrooms, helps with OCD sufferers. And they ran their campaign. I think they went on to raise about £111,000, but it was a donation-based campaign. So because it was going towards the charity. Again, they had to, really provide evidence as well, though.
That's super interesting. I'll check out. I love that kind of research. So coming back to the fact, to the psychology side of it, there's a question about crowdfunding campaigns' impact on your ability to raise funds through other avenues like VCs and angels. There are some conflicting statements going out there in the industry. Some investors say that it could be a signal of weakness due to lack of institutional investors that you decided to go to crowdfund, or others see it as another way to show traction. What's your view on that?
I'll jump in first with that one. I think this will come down to personal opinion from the investor that you're talking to at the time after the raise. From our perspective, it definitely shows traction, shows achievements, especially if you're a scale-up business, because it shows that you've got a community. It shows that you've been able to promote your brand and get investors on board onto your campaign. And as we mentioned earlier, a crowdfunding campaign isn't necessarily just your customers. it will need some sort of lead investment, and that might be from an institutional investor or an angel investor. So just saying that all crowdfunding campaigns means that, you know, you haven't got institutional investment isn't necessarily true. We find sometimes that perhaps people that maybe don't know quite as much about the crowdfunding landscape, or perhaps have sort of quite antiquated views about it, because think of it as quite of a new way of raising investment. Think of it as a bit like, oh no, I'm not quite sure about that. I don't want to go there. You know, I wouldn't recommend you do that. But actually, yeah, it all comes down to the investor's personal opinion on it, I think, rather than any kind of generalized statements of it's good or bad.
Some of our startups actually found it useful, and they've built relationships with angels who didn't necessarily invest through the crowdfunding campaign, but it was a great network building exercise. And in the next round, when they did have a lot more traction, those angels actually invested not through a crowdfunding campaign, but directly.
Exactly. And just to add to that as well, there's a huge wealth of benefits to crowdfunding, but it's not just about the money. Especially for equity, which are notoriously harder and more difficult to launch a campaign anyway. You know, it's not, as I say, it's not just about the money, it's about the marketing, it's about the exposure. We've had clients that have reported getting new contracts. You know, somebody that has noticed their campaign and started talking to them about or connected with them during the campaign, not because they wanted to invest, but because they wanted to give them a deal for, you know, sort of a new contract to expand globally or something like that. So that there's lots of different benefits, but as you said as well, in terms of angel investors that will sit and wait and watch, they like to look at that traction. If they see, right, you've had a successful crowdfunding campaign, it wasn't for me at this point in time because you're a little bit too early stage, but I'll wait and watch and see how you grow, and then maybe in a year or two's time I'll, you know, check in and see if it's then an opportunity for that angel investor down the line. So it's all good traction and achievements to shout about in my mind.
Yeah, having had clients now that raised their first crowdfunding campaigns back in early 2017, like seeing them grow, go on to get equity, go on to get other investment opportunities. I think that crowdfunding, it just brings to the surface all the hard work that everyone really has to do when they start a business. You've got to do your brand awareness, your networking, your marketing, your social media, your email marketing, all of that, like Steph said, your PR. But the thing with crowdfunding is it's then all on show. So it's very public. It's not just I've got a few rich friends that are funding me kind of in the background. It really, in my opinion, it really shows investors, both now and in the future, that you worked your butt off and you can really handle all this stress. And like, you know, everyone said the emotional roller coaster of crowdfunding as well. So it shows that you've got that grit and you can be public and you can be vulnerable and you can put yourself out there and you can succeed. And these crowdfunding platforms, they've got great SEO. When investors are then going to maybe be looking you up, your website is obviously coming up on page 1 of Google, but probably these past campaigns are as well. And therefore, it's not necessarily you having to say, I'm amazing, I got, let's say in Ilaria's case, 150 pre-sales. But actually, these people are going to find out a bit more about your business. They're interested, and they're finding these things out themselves because it's so public and out there.
And just to add one more thing to that, it's why the fact that these crowdfunding crowdfunding campaigns are public is why it's so important for them not to fail, because you don't want to fail publicly. And yes, all the history of your successes are visible on Google, but so are your failures. And this again links back to what Charlie was saying earlier in terms of making sure that you're launching a campaign at a percentage where you know it's going to fund, because you really have to lock in that success before you actually even hit the button to go public. You need to have absolute confidence that it's going to hit its target and successfully overfund, because you don't want to fail publicly.
Can maybe add something about the experience of being a founder in this process? It's actually very, very stressful. So you really have to consider it's a month of continuously like creating content, communicating, be out there, and you do have the stress of the time rolling, and you don't see like if it's not successful right away, it starts to be stressful, and so you really have to take that into account. I think that was our biggest learning, is that you really have to prepare a campaign. We did prepare, but we said like, yeah, sure, it would be great, we will do it, and so on. And then we had that kind of reality check that, it just doesn't work on its own. You really have to work every day to make it grow, and communicate a lot and engage with your community. So it's not an easy exercise, I would say. So if I can also advise whenever possible to be also like to have agency, or like people that actually do this as a work to really help you through your campaign. Of course, if you have the budget to do that. But I think it's like most, I think the campaign, at least in reward-based, the one that are most successful, it's because they do have an agency behind that actually prepares all the PR, all the content and stuff like that. So I think that's just, then it's just personal, and you might have people that succeed otherwise. But like for what I've seen, the most successful reward-based campaign are those who are really backed by professionals doing a professional job of pushing the campaign.
Thank you so much, Ilaria, and thank you. You just jumped in onto my question. It's important to consider all perspectives, right? The positives and the do's and the don'ts, and the positives and its kind of negatives of running a crowdfunding campaign. So continuing with your experience, did you use a consultancy? And if you haven't, would you go through that again? Did you find it worthwhile? And be completely transparent.
So I haven't. If I would go back, I would. Because I think that's where we really eat the because we tried to do it on our own. So of course, because we didn't have funds at the beginning, and as I said, you really have to consider that you have to spend money to have a successful campaign. We couldn't spend that much at that point in time, so we prefer to do everything on our own. Today, I think that was probably short-sighted. We probably could have spent a little bit more, and we might have raised probably a little bit more if we had higher investments. But it's then it's depending on what you can actually afford at a specific point in time. And I know people that succeeded without any agency, so I don't think that it's it's necessary. But you really have to be conscious on what it's going to take in terms of effort, marketing, communication, also visuals, video. Like you really, either you can do everything in-house at a certain level, or you might need to get some help somehow.
Thank you very much, Ilaria. So we can take one more question, and this one is about is there a best or better time of the year to launch a rewards crowdfunding campaign, and what are successful tactics on building a community that will back a rewards campaign?
So there's definitely good times of the year and bad times of the year. Summer, bad time of the year. December, January, bad times of the year. Depending on what you're doing, also think if there's a UN day or an awareness week or an awareness month, because if you're launching it around that time, then all those other organizations are doing some of your marketing and awareness building for you. So that's really handy. In terms of, again, launching, if you launch because you finished your page at 3 o'clock on a Saturday morning, it's probably not the best time to launch. People aren't really up and awake and ready to give you money. So Tuesdays and Wednesdays in the afternoon in the UK, Tuesdays and Wednesdays are the best time to launch your campaign. That way you get kind of the money in from the UK, and then when the USA wakes up, they'll see the campaign's already got some money in, and that's a really good starting point. And then also, again, just thinking about your audience. When are they interested in this product? What time of the year, all of that sort of thing. You wouldn't sell snowboard gear to them in May, like that wouldn't work. And also thinking about when they get paid. So again, in the UK, most people are getting paid at the end of the month. So psychologically, they feel richer at the beginning of the month. Whether they are or not is a different matter. But then launching on the 1st or the 2nd Tuesday or Wednesday of the month in the afternoon in either like March, April, May, September, October, November, depending on, again, if there is a UN day or an awareness week or month, that would be the best time to launch your campaign from a rewards perspective.
Can I add maybe one thing that is specific to hardware project? Be aware that if you have to deposit, like to file for patents, you cannot show your product. So it's really important to have that in mind, that in the timing of your project, you have to be able to either share publicly the information about your product, or you cannot share. You can say something about the story, like something like that, but you cannot really show how it works, because otherwise you cannot file for patents later. So that's more depending the timing of your project. Yeah, so one thing that I forget to mention, but it's more about the question about how to build a community and how to join that. Also, depending on the type of product, don't overlook the power of offline community. So actually during the campaign, do something that is offline, to do events, and actually maybe have people, instead of subscribing to your campaign, just register for the event and make them like maybe pay a fee of like €5 to join to the event, and these are all donation that goes to the crowdfunding. So just be creative in how you do that, because one of the rewards can be the event itself.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Fantastic discussion. I feel like we only have an hour, unfortunately. I feel like this can go on and on and on, and so many insights I want to kind of tease out of your brains, but we still have 1 minute. So maybe if you can share one key thing for a successful campaign from your experience. Let's start with you, Charlie. Just what made the biggest difference, you think?
Probably start early with your customers. Obviously friends and family and your friends, if they're going to put money into your campaign. Yeah, usually you can call upon them, I suppose, once the campaign is either privately live or publicly live. But with your customer set, definitely start to warm them up to the fact that you're going to be undergoing an equity round or rewards based round, so they have time to prepare to invest in your business, I suppose.
Brilliant. Thank you. Who would like to go next? Steph?
Yeah, Charlie stole my top tip. So I'll bring another one in, which is don't be shy. Like, don't worry about what people are going to think of you when you go out to them with your proposition. We sometimes get people saying, oh, I don't want to speak to my Auntie Sally about it because, well, she won't invest. But you just never know somebody's financial situation and how much money they've got in their pocket, essentially, until you ask. So just don't be shy. Put yourself out there. Like we were saying earlier, this is a public way of raising money, whether that's rewards or equity. So you have to be comfortable putting yourself out there publicly. So just go out there, talk to people, and don't worry about getting no's. You'll find a yes in there somewhere.
Thank you very much. Ilaria?
Yeah, one thing that I would say on this, because for us was really problematic to say, okay, just really put your face on thing, and specifically on a sexual wellness thing, like to engage your Facebook friends where you have people like you went to school with, and so you're kind of embarrassed to just show yourself in this, but it's really important, and you really have to keep in mind that depending on what you're doing, but mostly people will actually support you as a founder in your entrepreneurial journey. And so it's really also important to not focus only on the product, but also on your founder story, and to share it, and to really have people engaging around a project itself rather than one specific product.
Thank you very much, Ilaria. Jes, would you like to
I agree with everything everyone said. Start early. Don't be afraid to ask. People are a lot nicer than we actually give them credit for. People do want to help people. I'll go more specific, and I would say create all of your content for that last 2 weeks period before you've launched. All the videos to say how thankful you are, how well it's going, only 24 hours left in the campaign. Create it all before you've launched, because you're going to be so tired, you're going to be so stressed, you're going to be so emotional. You don't want that to come across in the video. So however stressed you think you are before you've launched, it's not going to be anything to how stressed you are near the end. So create it before, so that you can really come across still positive, enthusiastic, and really excited about the crowdfunding campaign. And it is actually going to be genuine. Whereas towards the end of the campaign, you're going to have a little bit of a, let me just go and rest.
Fantastic.
Take on that. Yes, just the next time I'll do that. That's very good advice. Yes, because you won't sleep, so you will have some sleepless nights, and it will be visible. So do everything before. Yes.
Right. It's like birthing a baby. And I've just seen Charlie's son. Is it Ruben? Has Lucy brought him in? So I think that's how they go. Okay, fantastic discussion. Once again, thank you so much. Brilliant panel. Wish we could do it again. Maybe we will. Thank you everybody who joined, dialed in, connect to us on LinkedIn, check out Crowdfund 360 and ISQ crowdfunding. They can really support you guys. And fantastic Ilaria, amazing Charlie. Thank you for supporting us.
Thanks for having us.